Hello everyone, I'm Shadow Rider. This is the 5th lore episode within this series on The Vale. This series is covering the upcoming plot for Sansa, or Alayne Stone, which will most likely be the Winged Tourney. In the first video, we discussed the external politics of The Vale and everything important going on outside our main cast. In the second video, we discussed all the mysteries going on surrounding Lysa, Hoster Tully, and Littlefinger. In the third video, we discussed Lysa's location and Jon Arryn's history, then we explained Littlefinger's appointment, and lastly why Littlefinger's probably Sweetrobin's father. In the fourth video, we started our explanation on the murder of Jon Arryn, explaining the parts Varys, Cersei, and Pycelle played. That's where we're at currently. Before we start, major spoiler warning for the books, and possible spoilers for the Winds of Winter. If you care about things getting spoiled, don't watch this video. Now we have two players left, Lysa and Littlefinger. We know for a fact that Lysa was told by Littlefinger to put Tears of Lys into Jon Arryn's wine. For a lot of people that would be enough, but for me it isn't. There are two problems here. Firstly, it probably wasn't Tears of Lys that Lysa put into Jon Arryn's wine, but we'll come back to that later. Secondly, Littlefinger does not have a motivation for killing Jon Arryn. Or does he? Let's talk about it. Let's begin with Littlefinger's most famous quote. "Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder." Now, this would explain everything. He killed Jon Arryn because he wanted to create chaos. Except that, of course, this makes little sense. First of all, killing Jon Arryn does not create chaos, it prevents it, especially in the short term. Killing Jon Arryn causes the truth to remain unrevealed, which of course prevents the chaos from the truth getting out. Second of all, the statement doesn't represent Littlefinger from the books. As George R. R. Martin said in, I believe, 2013, book Littlefinger and television show Littlefinger are very different characters. They're probably the character that's most different from the book to the television show. The link to this interview is in the description. But this pretty much says that the mentality of wanting chaos is something television show Littlefinger hold, but this doesn't necessarily mean that book Littlefinger holds it. It's actually quite likely that book Littlefinger wouldn't hold this. So I'm sorry, but this theory doesn't really work. Next explanation, Littlefinger is just helping someone. This is what George R. R. Martin says in the same interview. You can call upon him to do whatever you want. And later, people find him very helpful to their schemes. The theory is that either Cersei, or Varys, or someone else went to Littlefinger and asked, "Hey, can you kill Varys for me?" And he answered, "Yeah, fine, I'll do that, no problem." From Littlefinger's perspective, this kinda adds up, especially if this is being combined with some of the later explanations. If it already was in Littlefinger's benefit to kill Jon Arryn, and then someone comes up and asks, well, I find it quite likely that he would accept. The problem here is not Littlefinger, it's the other players. Because the thing is, these other players already have the means to poison Jon Arryn. Both Cersei and Varys should have access to, for example, the kitchen staff, and they should be able to poison Jon Arryn on their own. They do not need to involve Littlefinger, so why would they? It just feels so extremely convoluted. Maybe it happened, but I don't think so. Next possibility. Littlefinger is trying to keep Jon Arryn alive. Wait, what? Well, let me explain. As I said in the beginning, the poison Littlefinger gave Jon Arryn isn't actually Tears of Lys. It's probably a lot less deadly poison, which just acts like Tears of Lys, but isn't Tears of Lys. How did I come to this conclusion? Well, let's look at what we know. We are told that he was poisoned with Tears of Lys, but we know the following about Jon Arryn's poisoning. After he was poisoned, he was sick for several days with bowel problems, whereafter, thanks to Maester Colomon's treatment of laxatives, he would have been fine. Compare this to the Tears of Lys. You get extreme cramp and pain, and you die within the hour if not treated correctly. Not only are symptoms off, and is the treatment of laxatives extremely weird, the first big piece of evidence comes from Maester Colamon. Tears of Lys should be extremely deadly and should be extremely easy to recognize. And yet, Maester Colamon, who was treating Littlefinger, did not know it was Tears of Lys. Let me explain. Maester Colamon is the Eyrie Maester. This means he was the Maester in the Eyrie. He followed Jon Arryn to King's Landing, probably to care for Sweetrobin and serve there. After Jon Arryn was poisoned, Maester Colamon treated him, which means that if it were Tears of Lys, he should have known it. But when Maester Colamon returns to the Eyrie, he doesn't care to tell anyone that his old lord was poisoned. I don't know about you, but that seems like quite an important detail I try to tell literally everyone. To him, he would be the only person in the entirety of the Vale who knew with a certainty that Jon Arryn was poisoned. If he wants to bring the killers to justice, he needs to speak up. And yet, he doesn't. The second big piece of evidence comes from the fact that Jon Arryn could have survived the poisoning. It seems awfully dumb for this to be a real attempt to take Jon Arryn's life. Littlefinger does not seem like the type of person who would mess up like this. If he wanted Jon Arryn dead, Jon Arryn should have died. And yet, Jon Arryn could have survived, which leads me to believe that he didn't want Jon Arryn to die. In other words, he didn't give Jon Arryn a lethal poison, which means he didn't give him Tears of Lys. Or, of course, Littlefinger could have given him a non-lethal dose of Tears of Lys. Either way, this leads me to believe that Jon Arryn wasn't poisoned by the super obvious, super well-known, super deadly Tears of Lys. Or at least not with a lethal dose of Tears of Lys. Why? Why did Littlefinger give Jon Arryn a poison that wasn't deadly? Well, one answer is that Littlefinger didn't want Jon Arryn dead. No, quite the contrary. He wanted Jon Arryn to stay alive. Because let's think about it. If Jon Arryn wasn't killed by Littlefinger, he would have sooner or later been killed by Cersei or Varys. So, if Littlefinger wants to make sure that Jon Arryn survives, he needs to make sure that Jon Arryn would be on the lookout and a lot harder to kill. As Varys said himself, Jon Arryn was an honorable man, and he would never have accepted a taster or other forms of protection. The best way to make it obvious to Jon Arryn that he should be more careful would be by an unsuccessful murder attempt. So, Littlefinger poisoning with the super well-known Tears of Lys, which would lead Jon Arryn to the conclusion that someone tried to poison him, which would put him on alert. Then Jon Arryn could survive to be able to tell Robert about the incest, which may or may not have been beneficial to Littlefinger. Now, why specifically a failed poisoning? Well, let's say that Cersei still killed Jon Arryn after he recovered. Everyone at court probably would have known about the sickness, which looked an awful lot like a famous poison. And then Jon Arryn seemingly dies out of nowhere. You don't need to be a maester to understand that something would be very suspicious there. A failed poisoning is probably the best defense mechanism Littlefinger could possibly have put around Jon Arryn. It's definitely possible that this could have been Littlefinger's plan. We could sit here all day and talk about possible motives for this plan, but at the end of the day, things didn't really work out. Because Pycelle swooped in and let Jon Arryn die instead of him being healed. This was the only and most obvious option Cersei had to prevent Jon Arryn from gaining this shield of protection. Littlefinger should have known that Pycelle was able to do this, and that Littlefinger should have known that Pycelle would do this. If this really was Littlefinger's plan, it's awfully stupid. So, Littlefinger must have known that poisoning Jon Arryn with a non-lethal poison would have led to Pycelle killing Jon Arryn, which means that Pycelle killing Jon Arryn must have been part of his plan. Why would he want this? Well, I think the most obvious answer is to have a scapegoat. If things go sour, he could always get Maester Colemon, someone who worked for Lysa, in other words worked for Littlefinger, to tell everyone that Jon Arryn wasn't poisoned and that he easily could have been saved. If Maester Colemon would have said this, it would be undeniable proof to get Pycelle on trial and blamed for the murder of Jon Arryn, something which would leave Littlefinger free of accusations. If they already caught him one murderer, why would there be another? Now, this is also great when you consider that Littlefinger was maybe planning to go to the Vale, where Lysa and Maester Colemon are currently. He can still, whenever he wants to, reveal that Jon Arryn could easily have survived, and yet Pycelle killed him. He can still, whenever he wants to, get the entirety of the Vale to oppose the Lannisters. If this really was his plan, he has set everything up perfectly. If he ever wants to oppose the Lannisters, he can reveal this, and voila, everyone would be turned against him. On the other hand, if he was ever accused of poisoning Jon Arryn, he could have Maester Colemon reveal that, wow, Jon Arryn wasn't poisoned, and voila, accusations gone. Littlefinger has set up everything perfectly, so he can control the narrative surrounding Jon Arryn's murder. This means that whatever happens, and whatever conclusions others draw, he can always change the narrative to favor him. So whatever happens after the death of Jon Arryn, he will always win. Now, this is great and all. It explains why Littlefinger gave Jon Arryn a non-lethal poison to control the narrative. But it still doesn't explain our original question. Why does Littlefinger want to kill Jon Arryn? Well, the fourth answer is he didn't. He didn't want to kill Jon Arryn, but he was just making the best of a bad situation. Remember, if he didn't kill Jon Arryn, someone else would. So he makes sure that, in Jon Arryn's death, all the power goes to him by making sure that Maester Colemon becomes a key piece. Because think about it, if Cersei hadn't sent Pycelle to fill the healing, Jon Arryn would have been a lot harder to kill unsuspiciously, so Littlefinger pretty much forced Cersei's hand here. Now this fits really well, except I don't believe that's all of it. I believe the full extent of Littlefinger's motivations runs a lot deeper. In these final two theories, I'll discuss some more thorough motivations. But if you do not agree with those theories, this is my best answer. So, Theory 5, Sweetrobin's parentage. This theory is built upon the assumption that Littlefinger is Sweetrobin's father. I discussed this in my third lore video within this series, and personally, I believe this. But even if you don't believe this, I would recommend watching this, because this presents some interesting ideas. So, what's the theory? Well, according to some, Jon Arryn figured out that Sweetrobin wasn't his son. Then, because Littlefinger didn't want this to be revealed, he murdered Jon Arryn. Is this even possible? Could Jon Arryn have figured out that Sweetrobin wasn't his? Well, maybe. On the one hand, we know that Jon Arryn borrowed a book with the lineages of all the major houses. Within this book, he could maybe have seen that all Arryn children have the sandy blonde hair, while Sweetrobin has brown hair. He maybe could have used this to conclude that Sweetrobin wasn't actually his. On the other hand, we know that Jon Arryn is extremely honorable and trusting. I cannot imagine him finding this truth completely on his own. Unless someone hinted him towards it, I do not think he would have ever searched for this. So I guess Varys could have given him this information, maybe, but it's not really ideal. Now, it is true that Jon Arryn doesn't actually need to know this information for Littlefinger to kill him. Someone, say Varys, could have told Littlefinger that Jon Arryn knew, even though he actually didn't. Then Littlefinger would have killed Jon Arryn because he thought Jon Arryn knew. On the one hand, this makes sense. It would fit with Varys dancing his dance of information, and add to the fact that he indirectly killed Jon Arryn. On the other hand, why would Varys, or anyone for that matter, do this? Remember, if Littlefinger doesn't kill Jon Arryn, Cersei or someone else will. Littlefinger does not need to be involved here, especially because Littlefinger has Lysa as his source, who could immediately tell him if this was true or not. It seems unnecessarily risky and dumb. Both of these theories are possible, but they're not really convincing. Either way, Jon Arryn somehow figures out that Sweetrobin isn't his, or Littlefinger believes that Jon Arryn has figured this out, and now Littlefinger wants to stab him. But first, do we have any proof that Jon Arryn knew about Sweetrobin? Well, not really. A lot of people point to Jon Arryn's ramblings before his death. He says Robert and the seed is strong. The standard way of interpreting this is Robert, the king's seed is strong. In other words, Robert's kids should look like him. In other words, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen aren't Roberts. Now this works, it fits perfectly, and it makes sense. I personally don't understand why he didn't just say Robert's kids aren't his, but hey, maybe he was trying to say that and no one could understand him. I guess that fits with the idea that people hear what they expect to hear, and no one was expecting Jon Arryn to say Robert's kids aren't his, but then Lysa was expecting to hear the seed is strong or something of the sorts, so she was able to hear that. As I said, it works and it makes sense. But this is not the only interpretation. Some people interpret Robert as in Sweetrobin and not Robert Baratheon. Remember, Sweetrobin's actual name is Robert Arryn. Now this would fit, I guess, but then whose is the seed referring to? His own? Well, not really, because he's only had stillborn children. The Arryn seed overall? Well, maybe, because that would indicate that all Arryn children should be blonde. But on the other hand, why wouldn't he just say, my seed is strong? Or even better, our seed is strong? Maybe Littlefinger's? Well, maybe, if he would have known that Littlefinger was the actual father. It really shouldn't have been so hard for him to figure this out. Littlefinger was a person who Lysa liked, and Littlefinger fits Sweetrobin's appearance. But then, the seed is strong is such a vague way to say it. Let's take a step back and look at it. If Jon Arryn knew about Sweetrobin, what would he want to achieve? Well, if he figured out that he was murdered because he knew about Sweetrobin, and not because he knew about incest, then maybe he could have wanted revenge, I guess. Then he would have used his dying breath to reveal to the world Sweetrobin's true parentage. Except once again, the seed is strong is such a vague way to say it, and more importantly, Jon Arryn is not the type of person who would want such petty revenge. Remember, if anything, Jon Arryn is honorable, and that does not seem like an honorable thing to do. But especially if he did not act out of spite, it doesn't make sense that he would reveal the truth at all. Revealing the truth does nothing for him, and it only throws his wife under the bus. If nothing else, he has the honor to stay silent and take the secret to the grave, only so his wife can live with the son she loved so much. But even though he doesn't seem to have any motivation for revealing it, let's assume that he does. Because even with a motivation, this makes no sense. If he was trying to say that Sweetrobin wasn't his, I expect he'd have the balls and the honor to actually say it, instead of hiding it behind such a vague statement like the seed is strong. Even Lysa does not fear that this reveals Sweetrobin's parentage, and she suspects everything, especially things that could hurt her child. If anything, this is proof against the Sweetrobin theory, and Lysa definitely could expect something like, why Littlefinger? So the people hear what they want to hear argument doesn't really add up anymore. Having all this said, I don't think he would ever reveal such a truth on his deathbed, and I think the manner of the reveal is way too vague and not something he would do. No, I am near 100% sure that the seed is strong is a statement about Robert Baratheon. But could the Robert statements have been about Sweetrobin? Theoretically, yes. And could Jon Arryn have been killed because he knew this knowledge? Theoretically, yes. Do we have any proof that this was the case? No. These statements were probably not about Sweetrobin. But is it possible? Yes. Well, maybe. There is one more piece to this puzzle we have to discuss. Why did Littlefinger kill Jon Arryn when he knew this information? Well, the most prominent theory from what I could find is that Littlefinger wanted his own son to rule the Vale. Now this is dumb for a lot of reasons. From Littlefinger not being the type of person to care about such sentiments, to Littlefinger not even liking Sweetrobin, to Sweetrobin being prone to die. But the most damning reason is Jon Arryn is extremely honorable. Even though he might have suspected that Sweetrobin wasn't his, he could never know for sure. And as long as he doesn't know for sure, he would never publicly declare that Sweetrobin wasn't his. And even if he knew for sure, I don't expect he would do it. And as long as this isn't public knowledge, he can't really disown Sweetrobin. Maybe if the time comes that he has another son, he could send Sweetrobin to the wall, but I do not believe he would ever declare his own son a bastard, and I do not believe he will ever get himself his own son. So, if not to protect Sweetrobin, why would Littlefinger kill Jon Arryn? The only reason I can see is to protect himself. Remember, Jon Arryn could have figured out that Littlefinger was the father. Littlefinger was a boy Lysa really liked, and Littlefinger does look a lot like Sweetrobin. And even though Jon Arryn has the honor to stay silent about the boy, he can still get Littlefinger kicked out of his position or even killed. Remember, he was Hand of the King, so this would have been a genuine threat to Littlefinger, assuming that Jon Arryn could have kicked him out or killed him before getting murdered by Cersei. So yeah, it could make sense that he would want Jon Arryn killed earlier than, for example, Cersei, because he was scared of retribution. What makes this even better is that Littlefinger could have been scared of this, even if Sweetrobin wasn't actually his child. The threat isn't the truth, but it's that Jon Arryn believes the truth. The actual truth doesn't matter. Littlefinger would have been killed by Jon Arryn either way, which means that Littlefinger has to kill Jon Arryn either way. So, to summarize, maybe Littlefinger killed Jon Arryn to silence him. It doesn't really matter if Littlefinger is Sweetrobin's father or not, as long as Jon Arryn believes this is the case. Littlefinger's in danger. And he has to kill Jon Arryn quickly. So the fact that Littlefinger murdered Jon Arryn is by no means proof that Sweetrobin is Littlefinger's son. If anything, there's more proof against it. And personally, I don't believe this theory. As established, it's theoretically possible, but there's no proof to back it up, and it's pretty convoluted. Then we come to our final theory of today. Killing Jon Arryn was part of Littlefinger's master plan. Now, Littlefinger's master plan is long, and it's complex, and it's a lot to talk about. Most of it will be for another day. We are only going to go through some of the more surface level parts of his plans, but yes, I do know that there is more in this rabbit hole of creative potential. So, what is the idea of Littlefinger's master plan? Well, it's the idea that Littlefinger is not a simple opportunist who only lives in the present, but that he has actually had a plan all along. What this plan is leading to, and all these minor points that lead him to his future goals, is not important for this video. All we're talking about is the murder of Jon Arryn and how this brought Littlefinger into a lot of power. To start, we need to look at the consequences of his murder, because his murder caused several things. Firstly, it brought Ned Stark down to King's Landing. With the right influence, Littlefinger got Ned Stark to learn about the incest, then Cersei was forced to kill Robert, which led to Ned Stark starting a coup. In this coup, Littlefinger had total power to decide who won, and because he controlled the city watch, so he could get any prize in exchange for his loyalty. In this case, he chose Harrenhal. This coup also led to the Stark-Lannister conflict, which gave Harrenhal back to Littlefinger because Tyrion had taken it away in the meantime. So yeah, in the long term, it made him Lord Paramount of the Trident and gave him one of the most powerful castles. Quite the prize. Secondly, it took Jon Arryn out of the picture, which freed up Lysa. Remember, Littlefinger controls Lysa, but Lysa doesn't really control anything as long as Jon Arryn is still alive. But upon his death, she becomes Lady of the Vale, which pretty much hands the Vale over to Littlefinger. This means that Littlefinger has pretty much been handed 2 entire kingdoms of Westeros, solely thanks to this murder. But then the question remains, was all this planned, or is Littlefinger just the luckiest dude to ever live? Well, personally, I believe this was all planned, especially because Littlefinger probably caused Jon Arryn's death in the first place. Let me explain. The reason everyone wants to kill Jon Arryn is because he figured out about the incest. So, if Littlefinger could have been the one to let Jon Arryn know about the incest, then he would pretty much have killed him. Or even better, if Littlefinger could have been the one to let someone else know about the incest, who could then tell Jon Arryn. This would allow his fellow players more time to come to the realization that Jon Arryn needs to be dealt with. And how did Jon Arryn come to know this information again? Well, because Stannis somehow figured out about the incest and went to tell Jon Arryn about it. And how did Stannis figure this out? My theory is, of course, that Littlefinger told him. Or at least Littlefinger gave him the pieces to the solution. Because think about it, Stannis figured out that several children were actually Robert's bastards, including children in brothels and children who themselves didn't even know that they were his bastards. I do not believe that Stannis could ever have figured this out on his own, and I do not believe that Stannis ever would have even tried to figure this out on his own. Nor does he even have the means to figure this out on his own. So someone must have told him. And think about it. Who else has the means and the motive to tell this to Stannis? Who else but Littlefinger? Varys doesn't have the motive. Cersei doesn't have the motive. Renly could possibly have done it, but we are told that he didn't. Everyone who works for Cersei or Varys wouldn't tell, of course, which includes Pycelle. And Robert Baratheon, Barristan Selmy and Jon Arryn didn't know about it. There are no options left, except of course, Littlefinger. So let's summarize. What is Littlefinger's master plan? Littlefinger tells Stannis about the incest, which leads him to telling Jon Arryn. Now that Jon Arryn knows, everyone wants him dead. Then Littlefinger does his dead scheme, look at Theory 4, which gives him a free hand of extra power over the situation. Then Jon Arryn gets replaced with Ned Stark, and with the right influence, Ned Stark also figures out about the incest. This gets Robert Baratheon killed, which leads to a succession crisis in which Littlefinger gains Harrenhal for supporting the Lannisters. And because of Jon Arryn being dead, Lysa Arryn becomes Lady of the Vale, which also gives Littlefinger the entirety of the Vale. Now, is this all of Littlefinger's master plan? No, there is a lot more to discuss. Things are a lot more complicated than this, and this is only scratching the surface. But in this case, we've solely talked about the murder of Jon Arryn and how that benefited Littlefinger a lot. But I do want to present another piece of evidence to support the idea that Littlefinger has a master plan. In the interview we used in the beginning, George R. R. Martin calls Littlefinger the most Machiavellian character in A Song of Ice and Fire. Now that's interesting, because if you believe that Littlefinger is only opportunistic and doesn't have a plan and only cares about the short term, then he would never be Machiavellian. For anyone unfamiliar, the term Machiavellian generally refers to a character who believes that the ends justify the means. But if Littlefinger only thinks about the short term, in other words he doesn't think about the ends, then he cannot be Machiavellian. No, the fact that George R. R. Martin calls him Machiavellian must mean that he has a master plan and has been thinking about the long term. So, does Littlefinger have a motive for killing Jon Arryn? Very much yes. But to say this, you have to admit that Littlefinger's actions are all planned. Now, is this definite proof that Littlefinger's actions are all planned? No, because there's still the option that Littlefinger is just extremely lucky. But does the option of Littlefinger planning everything out seem a lot more likely? Definitely yes, because undeniably this move was extremely beneficial to him. It gave him both Harrenhal and the Vale in the long run, which made him one of the most powerful players in Westeros. Now let's look at this Stannis thing. Does the fact that Littlefinger must have told Stannis disprove all other options? Well, yes, because this is definite proof that Littlefinger must have been planning it. So if you're the type of person who believes that the text is always right, this is your only option. But personally, I am open to the idea that this could be some oversight of the author, and that he simply didn't consider how Stannis learned this knowledge. So if you're open to that idea, that George R. R. Martin has made some mistakes, then I guess you could still argue for other options. But either way, the last option is by far the most realistic. So, those are the three options I'll leave you with. Either he made the best of a bad situation, something that's possible, but to me, not enough. Or he killed Jon Arryn because he knew about Sweetrobin, something that's really unconvincing to me, but it does fit the idea of Sweetrobin possibly being Littlefinger's son. But because it works if Sweetrobin is Littlefinger's son, and if he isn't, Jon Arryn's murder is not proof of Sweetrobin's parentage. Now, both of these still have one problem. They contradict with the fact that Littlefinger must have told Stannis about the incest. If you believe at the text at least, they're impossible. So that leaves us with the only option. Everything was planned. This is 100% possible, and I couldn't find any evidence to contradict it. And we know that the murder of Jon Arryn was extremely beneficial to Littlefinger on the long term. So it seems really realistic that he would have planned all this. And no one else could have told Stannis, so considering that, Littlefinger must have planned it. There is simply no other option. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like. If you didn't enjoy the video, feel free to leave a dislike. If you disagree, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.